We've decided a few years ago that prior to our parties, we'd try and do something educational. And we realized that technology education wasn't being like super successful. And we thought, why don't we do some business education? And that's been super well received. And so we're kind of continuing on that trend. Kind of to that end, I've always believed that people are a critical part of business. I think that's true, certainly in a service business where people are a big part of the product, but I think it's probably true in every single business. Whether it's machines that we're operating, stuff we're doing in the background, even if we're inventing new things, it's the people that are getting all of that work done that are helping us execute. And it's always critically important to make sure that we're recruiting and retaining the right people. I think it's extra important right now. We're in a near full employment or possibly a full employment economy. Certainly feels like to me, for every good person that you'd want to hire, they probably have 10 or 15 job opportunities out there. And so to me, that's made two things critically important. One is we retain the great people that we have, understand how to communicate with them, understand what positions they're going to be good at, understand how to help them grow and achieve their greatest potential so we don't have to backfill them, and also to make sure that the people that we're hiring to the greatest extent possible are the right people, not only for the job, but to fit the culture of the company. And so today is really going to be a lot about that. This is IT Direct's second foray into using kind of DISC and assessment modeling. We first tried it like 10 years ago and failed miserably at it. We got reintroduced to it by Pam Butterfield about 5 years ago through an entrepreneurs organization event. I'll let Pam talk about it since she's really the pro at this. And what we got reintroduced to was that we were only using about 20% of what the complete assessment looks like. So I sort of akin it to driving down a dark country road with our lights off and one eye open and wondering why we crashed. So once we learned how to use all of the different tools and functions, and it became part of our entire process, not only for recruiting, but for how we deal with employees in their one-on-ones and their growth plans and how we map things forward, it has been transformational for our ability to drive our voluntary turnover to near zero and to really improve greatly our recruiting success. It's not perfect, but it's really, really good. And certainly much better than it had been for a very, very long time. So that's kind of a bit of the intro, and I think from here we've got our great panels. This is Chris Jewell of Collins & Jewell. They're a fabrication shop in Eastern Connecticut, southeastern Connecticut, yep. Excuse me.
We're good with either.
Yeah, okay. And as long as it's east of the Connecticut River. Right, okay, got it. And they employ about 100 people, and then Jon Pace is our director of ops. So kind of can tell the IT Direct story, and then Pam, as I mentioned, is kind of the professional got us going, and she's got all kinds of war stories from the dozens and dozens of companies that she's seen. So so with that, Pam, I'll let you do kind of an intro on DISC and the assessment.
So when Ari talked to me about talking about assessments, one of the things that is important to understand about assessment is it's only a tool. And it's something that provides information and data about people, but you really have to look at how the tool fits into whatever kind of a solution you're looking for. And so I consider assessments as part of a workforce solution approach to things. And just to give you an example, are you familiar with NetSuite? It's a global company. They develop and deploy business management software. Back in 2012, their CEO at the time had said, we have a real workforce issue. We're bringing people in and they've got great credentials, but they're not working out because they don't have the right temperament. So they had the technical skills, but they didn't have the softer skills that were needed in their particular environment. It was a very entrepreneurial environment, and they were just having a very difficult opportunity to bring in the right people so that they could continue growing. So one of the things that they did is they started using, it's an assessment called Trimetrics HD, and it's actually a combination of 4 assessments, and it's something that IT Direct started using when they had 28 employees. So when you think about a global company, they've got, usually bigger budgets and all kinds. They also have bigger problems. But it's the kind of thing that it can be used in smaller companies or larger companies. And in fact, NetSuite started assessing people, and they took the data, so it wasn't just assessments that they used to hire people, but they actually started using the data to crunch the numbers that were produced by the assessments and look at who was succeeding in their company and who was not. And there were distinct patterns in terms of the people that were making it and the people that they weren't. So they were able to do continuous improvement to improve their hiring process. They also had a strategic initiative. The HR department reported directly to the CEO. He never delegated that and dropped it down in the organization because they saw workforce as like one of the #1 issues to be able to be successful. They also had a strategic initiative in 2012 to totally revamp 4 processes. One was recruiting, one was hiring, one was onboarding new employees, and one was training. And they realized it was a multi-year process. It took about 5 years to do. They're coming out of that right now, and they have a very different way of hiring and doing all of those things. So they've been able to grow significantly in the last X number of years. But the point I want to make is these are things that a lot of the larger companies use, but smaller companies can learn to do things too. And in terms of talking about an assessment being part of a solution, I want to draw your attention to the whiteboard over here. And see this development indicator hierarchy? This is one of the assessments that NetSuite used, IT Direct uses, and I've been working with a Canadian company, and they have a problem. They're high growth. They started about 8 years ago as a $2 million company. They're up to $25 million. They have about $25 million projects that they manage on a regular basis. And so the owner of the company hired a project manager. And the resume looked great, the education looked great, the experience looked great. He loved the guy, brought him in, and within about 9 months, this person was failing miserably. So I was contacted and asked, could you please assess this person and see what's going on? And I didn't know what I was going to find. So look at this. These are 25 competencies that are needed and required in the workplace to greater or lesser extent. And look where the ACE project manager came in. Project management was his 25th. It was his weakest skill. Okay. Now, that alone didn't solve the problem, because when the owner saw that, he said, come to think of it, we've lost a major client recently. Our projects are beginning to not be as good. Our reputation is beginning to diminish. Could you please assess all of the people that I have doing project management? And there were about 10 people that he had managing projects. Each one was managing 2 to 3. And when I assessed people and crunched the numbers, and it's not up here, but project management came in as number 23. So now we have some information to say there's a problem with not only the hiring, but the project management function in my company. And over the last year, we've been able to switch that around. So we brought in real project managers that are versed and skilled, and they're beginning to start to stem the tide of, project failures. But it was that data, and until the owner could see the data, you couldn't get his attention.
So Pam, just really quickly on my moderation role. So how do you think it happens that somebody's seeking to hire 5 project managers and ends up hiring people who, on an objective assessment, come out that project management is their lowest aptitude? How does something like that happen to a company?
Well, in this case, the project manager that it was number 25, he was the friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And you got to meet this guy. He's great. And he had an awfully good resume. And when you're looking at a resume and you see things like managed, led, responsible for, and you don't dig in and say, so you manage something, or you're responsible for something, or you led something. What exactly were you doing? How were you spending your time? What did you do? Who else was involved, and what did they do? There was no digging of that. And so I think he took the guy out for dinner and the beautiful resume, and they talked, and then he brought him in, and everybody in the company liked him. And so the hiring process was lacking.
Kind of lacking a little bit more on the relationship than on the needs. So can you give us like a little background maybe about what DISC is like and how the assessments work to get this information?
Yep. So DISC, well, first of all, assessments aren't tests. They're not 100% accurate. But what they do is they help you identify softer skills and traits that might not be normally visible and something you can't pick up about a stranger quickly. So DISC is something, it's a behavioral assessment. And what it does is it measures how people behave. In this particular world, it's called a Success Insights Wheel, but it's a picture of a DISC assessment. There's 60 different types that can come out of a DISC assessment. And what it does is it allows you to look at how decisive or dominant somebody is, how they like to interact with people, how steady, stable, and slow, so it gets into how quick or how slow somebody likes to work, and also how careful and compliant people are to the work that they're doing. And you can have strong tendencies or weak tendencies. And what that does is it translates into a behavioral hierarchy. Did you know that there are 12 behaviors that are required to greater or lesser extent in the workplace? And these are the behaviors. And what it will do, it will give each person their own personal behavioral hierarchy from strongest behavioral tendency down to weakest behavioral tendency. So someone who falls in section 12 of this wheel gets this behavioral tendency. And think about, somebody could say, "Oh yeah, I'm urgent. I'm able to take immediate action when required." Well, are you really? And maybe you interview well, but how do we measure that to be able to determine how quickly somebody actually works? Or in a sales environment, I need somebody who's really competitive. They want to win, they want to gain advantage, they want to close the deals. Are you really? Again, in an interview situation, somebody can come across that way, but we can actually measure that. And on a scale of 0 to 100, this person happens to be a 100, 195. I would not hire this person to do administrative work. That's not their strong suit. But for each person, you can find out how strong they are, how weak they are, and then match that to a job.
What are some of the ways that people could use DISC for? So we talked a little bit about hiring, right? So you get someone, we've all been through, you ask people questions, they can answer the question one way, but what do they really like to do? And honestly, one of the things we've discovered in doing it is some people think they like to do something or think they want to do something that they're just not suited for. Mm-hmm. And you hire them, you get them in the job, and then you find out 3 months later, yeah, they're not loving this job. And that can be problematic. So I think that's really great. How can you use DISC for people that you already have? Like I talked a little bit before about how we've used it internally for improving communication. How does that work?
John, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's something that, in terms of communication, you've done a lot of work with your team.
So just to recap the question to make sure I'm going to answer it completely. So we're talking about just overall communication or communication like with a goal in mind? Because there are two different approaches.
Why don't you take them both?
All right, perfect.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Yeah, like it. So DISC essentially can nail down everyone's individual profile to let them know. So it'll create like a 2-page worksheet for me that'll say, here are all the ways that I like to be communicated with, and here are all the ways I don't like to be communicated with. And with everybody in this room, all of our pages will be very individual for us. Or for you, I should say. So using those 2 worksheets quickly, just to understand like what I like to call the rules of the road, right? If I'm going to go talk to Ari, I'm going to read those 2 pages real quick and be like, okay, if I want this to be a very objective conversation, here's what works well for Ari. Oh, this isn't alignment with me. Let's concentrate on that. Here's what doesn't work for Ari. I don't really understand this area too much, so I'm going to stay away from that. And it allows that internal communication to really stifle in on keeping all parties really firing on all cylinders in that communication, in that
I
tasks.
use this a lot. Can you think of any like specific things? So, because what you're talking about, right, is like there's a page that comes, this assessment like comes out with 70 pages. And there's a page that says ways to communicate with the person and ways not to communicate with them. And they're usually like 8 to 11, 8 to 12 type things. I mean, I probably should have brought a sample in here, but they're really good. Like, I don't know if you can think of any of the kind of ways to or ways not to.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, you want to jump in?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, so you and I are high I's, I can tell right off the
Yeah,
bat, right?
I'm DI, yeah.
Right, so what that means is that if you come to us with a lot of details, we've moved on 20 minutes ago. So that's all part of it. So a lot of it is understanding what you are, but also more importantly, understanding what other people are and then how your interaction with those other people will work effectively. And for people that are working on in your company already where this is beneficial, so post-hire is when you're creating teams.
Yep.
So you don't want to have a bunch of I's on a team together, you don't want to have a bunch of C's on a team together.
A bunch of eyes will have a lot of fun.
They
The
certainly
objective
Right.
might not get
The
reached, but it will
result
be a
won't be
party.
there,
Yeah, but it will be
party.
fun the whole way.
Right. So really, it's part of that team building process. So when you have a specific project-based work that you want to do, you can put the right people together based on their strengths, not so much their weaknesses, but their strengths. You put people together that have the different strengths, then you're going to succeed a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of it is understanding others more importantly than understanding yourself.
I agree. It totally gets into that. There's like that people, you've probably all heard of the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. There was a business book called The Platinum Rule. I don't know if anybody's read that book, but it talks about that. Really, no, the secret is not to treat you the way I want to be treated, but to treat you the way you'd want to be treated. And the problem is, even with the best of intentions, when we see a problem, we tend to want to solve it through our own perspective and our own glasses. And how many times it's like, I have explained this to this person so many times. Why don't they get it? Well, the reason they probably don't get it because you're not explaining to them in the way they're built to understand it. And that was a big challenge for me personally. A, I like to move quickly. B, I like to go high level, talk objective, let's get it done. And some people don't, a lot of people, especially IT people, don't always communicate that way. And so it really is helpful to have like a checklist for me to go, okay, wait, I need to sit down, well, it's a bad example because John isn't this way, but I need to sit down with Jason and I need to have a conversation with him about this topic. I take out that page and I prepare using that page to be able to communicate with Jason in the way Jason's going to receive it instead of in the way Ari would receive it, which doesn't work. And that's, I think that's been a huge benefit kind of internally. So I'm just kind of bounce around a little bit.
Hold on, there's one
Go
thing
ahead,
I want
please.
to add
Yeah,
to
yeah,
it too. On top of the communication, we've been talking a lot about like the words to use and the approach to use, and I think the approach is also equally as important. Some of these reports may come back literally saying like, observe Chris's personal space. If you get too close, you could be communicating perfectly. But if you are too close to him, he's already not listening. He's just thinking, I'm uncomfortable. Yeah, you need to back up, right? There are some people you can't talk with a lot of hand gestures. That really doesn't work well for me because my hands are always in rapid motion. So they're paying attention to my hands and not my words. So really understanding that it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying and approaching it as well. And these 2 pages really help guide you into that.
And to give you an example, I was working with a pharmaceutical company, and there was a boss who was over on this side of the wheel. So they were very verbal, outgoing, a lot of hand motion, didn't put a lot of things in writing. And she was managing somebody who was on the opposite side of the wheel, who was more analytical, introverted. She was a researcher. And this person, the researcher, had worked for this company for close to 30 years. And they were so polar opposite in how they communicated that the researcher was getting frustrated enough that she was going to wage a hostile workplace lawsuit. And when companies lose those lawsuits, it can be like $250,000. Pretty serious.
Yeah, the communication is just so critically important. So let's just go kind of a little bit more high level. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit how Collins and Jewell has leveraged this? I mean, it's big, right?
Yeah.
It's like posted up in your training room.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
we talk all about it. So I don't want to
Yeah, in our break room, we have
everywhere.
it posted in our break room as well. But it's interesting because a couple of things have resonated with me already just in listening to what we've been talking about. Gary and I on the way up here were talking about a hire that we had made that had we asked those questions in the resume about lead and oversee and things like that, we probably would have never made that hire. And at the end of the day, that hire didn't work out. And he, what did you say,
Voluntary turnover?
he voluntarily turnover.
He voluntarily turned himself over?
That's right, yeah, he did that.
That's right, I got it.
So it did, at the end of the day, it didn't pan out,
No, it
but
doesn't
it's
matter.
interesting though, because we delved into DISC post-hire, which is probably a mistake. The pre-hire process is something that I'm very intrigued about. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And again, with us, it's really about that team creation. So if I know I've got a project that's gonna take days of analysis to do, I wanna make sure I hand that off to the person that is gonna suit, that's gonna be the strength that suits to them. I'm not gonna hand that off to a person that needs 6 or 7 projects at once to be satisfied. And so we utilize it quite a bit in that sense.
Which is important, just to really interrupt you, because
Sure.
not everyone knows the whole like Collins and Jewell backstory, but you guys do a lot of project work and big project
Right.
work and long-term project work.
Custom work.
Custom work,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we're a custom steel manufacturer. We do a lot of work for electric boat. A lot of the things we build are very large in scale. So everything we build is in tons. Nothing is small componentry. And we don't do high quantity of anything. So we do really, really well with people who think outside of the box and are not, that are not people that could do a lot of redundant work. They like to switch from project to project, so.
Well, you've got high-value, long-term projects, people changes, so
Absolutely.
your ability to create teams that can work together long-term and be successful
Yeah.
is hugely important.
And
So-
on the flip side, being able to identify our customers' strengths are equally important. So we're not gonna have 2 sheets on them, right?
Yeah.
So we have to decide, okay, what's the tendency of this customer? What's the best way to communicate with this customer? Because we have a lot of meetings with a lot of very different personalities, and our customer doesn't really follow the DISC philosophy, so they may give us a team that is all screwed up, and we've got to deal with it, but we've got to know the best way that we can handle it. So identifying people just on the run is kind of important to know how to do too. And that's really just understanding the traits, and you can get a gauge relatively quickly.
Well,
I was
on
gonna say
the-
with a trained eye, once you get used to these assessments, you can kind of meet somebody and within a couple minutes you're
Yes.
like, oh, high I, or the high D or high C.
Right.
And once you know how to really interact with that, especially compared to your own DISC character profile, it allows you to kind of get an upper hand advantage.
Yeah.
I was actually going to talk about that because I think, IT Director, you can talk about this, and I know Collins and Jewell, it's not just something that HR uses, right? This is something that gets pushed down and talked to all the organization. And I think you hit something nail on the head, which is you do it long enough and you kind of know the patterns, you can't get to 100% knowledge, but you can, especially if you're working with someone over and over, you can get to 75% of the way there. And what's more important is when you're thinking about it and your mind's already set up to be thinking, okay, I need to get a message, out to Anthony. How do I believe that Anthony would work and behave to get that message in a way he's going to be able to receive it? And think about the power of that, of how many of us have to deal with customers, vendors, and other employees, how powerful it could be to have all the employees thinking in that way, how to get the message to be received, because that giving the message isn't the goal. The message and the information being received is the goal. So I don't know if you guys want to pick up on that or any experiences.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So my experience here is more like it for internal. But I know in the last workshop, we had talked about how this year we had kicked off this whole leadership training that we've been doing here in IT Direct in 2019. And we spent, I can't even tell you, 6 or 7 sessions teaching all of our other leaders how to really utilize the power of this, so that when they're having conversations internally, when they're having conversations with customers and vendors, with everybody else, giving themselves the ability to really understand how do we make this the most successful conversation or successful project for all parties combined. And it's extremely powerful. We now have teammates who can take something that feels like it's steaming or feels like might be like about to lose control and really get it back towards a goal-driven task that all parties are working towards.
I think also, when you get your teams on board with this concept, it relieves a ton of frustration. So if you don't know this information, then when you're trying to communicate with somebody and it's unsuccessful, it's incredibly frustrating.
So you say it louder.
Right, so.
It's like the classic talking to a foreigner who doesn't understand English,
Right.
just talking slower and louder and hoping that somehow that's going to work.
Exactly. So that's a big benefit too, is the frustration that you don't have to deal with when you're communicating with others, because for them and for you, But what you don't want to do though is you don't want to label people either.
Yeah.
So you don't want to say, I'm going to put it to you this way because I know you're a D. You don't want to start that way. That's a bad way to do it. So it's not so much about labeling, it's just about understanding. And I think that's a big important part of it.
Have you guys found it useful in kind of performance coaching situations where somebody's not performing, or there's a lot of conversation right about right person, wrong seat on the bus. So have you guys found this DISC assessments useful in that area?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I've got a couple things I can share.
That's why I asked.
One thing I'll share. The first one is, I believe everyone in the room knows that we recently merged with ITG down in New Haven. And so while we were combining the teams, it was really trying to figure out how do we provide the best service now as a combined entity. Going through the assessments for everybody on both sides and really trying to evaluate where is everyone's skills best used. We were actually able to make a couple very quick changes where all of a sudden within a week we had employees who were like, wow, I love this. This is so much more fun. And no more than I think a week later, we had clients calling us saying, so-and-so is the best. Like, thank you for making this change. Like, we are already making positive forward. So, just making sure that you're using the right people in the right seat and the power that this can provide. So for example, in this situation, we had a technician who was on the back end working on like escalation tickets. Super smart individual, doing a great job. But when we went through his behavioral hierarchy, he was a 100 out of 100 in customer orientation. So when he's doing escalations, he's more working the problem. He's not really talking to people as much, and that's his number one behavior. So how do we change that up a bit? And we basically were like, hey, how would you like to be more of an on-site technician where you are interacting with a client every day? You don't know what you're walking into every day when you go on site, but that's there. And he was like, I think I would love that. And within a week, he's like, this is the best thing ever. And it's now been a month, and he's loving it, and it's working out really well.
I just want to touch on that real quick. I think that's super important, right? Not only is it great for the employee, because they're obviously much happier, but we tend to do our best work and deliver the most value when we're in the position that we like doing the most.
Right.
So, to have all 18 people down there go through the process, and I give John a ton of credit, went down there, interviewed each person individually to talk through, here's what your job role is, here's what I saw, and then having those conversations like, hey, how happy are you? Oh, no, I'm happy. Would you be happier doing this? And then you see the eyes like, yes, and then you put them out there, and the change is immediate and palpable. And that's where I was talking about earlier about how important that can be for retention. And think about how great that is, not just for that employee's retention, but for customer retention, for value delivery, for outcomes based. Like, it's amazing how powerful that can be. Sorry, you had another example.
And you were basically working with pretty much strangers.
Yes.
Yeah, true. That is very true. Right. We all still had a relationship that we had to build.
Right.
So the other side I was going to share is when we had to have more like difficult conversations, right? When you're not seeing eye to eye, or someone may not be performing, right? So using this tool to kind of look at why aren't you performing, and most importantly, like, how to approach the conversation, I think is like, for me, where I find the most value. I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody in the room, but when we have to have like a tougher conversation, or a conversation about someone maybe not in the right seat, or even, working for the right company, it's stressful to prepare for. It's stressful not knowing what the other party is going to feel or do. But when you have a tool like this that allows you to approach not just how they like to communicate and how to prepare to get around that, but really understand what motivates them. What behaviors are they exposed to now, and are they in alignment with this? And help them understand that maybe this isn't what's great for them. Or this is what's great for you. What do we need to do to adjust to really complement, maybe your top 7 as opposed to only your top 2? And adjust that way. And what ends up happening is instead of it being a one-way conversation where we're just saying this isn't working, it turns into a two-way conversation where both parties are fully interested in really getting the best outcome.
That's interesting. Yeah, we at Collins and Jewell, we try to look at ourselves as, when we hire people, we hire for character and then we train for the skill set. So you have the right character, personality traits, to the integrity, the value stream that we have to get into our organization, and then we'll teach you how to do the work. We've in the past, we've gone down the opposite approach where you've got all the skill set, but you don't have the character components, and it's blown up every time. So it's been a process of learning through negativity, but now we know, and we've got the special sauce for it. That being said, I think that this DISC assessment allows us to place people in areas of which they're going to be strong at. Drafting design for us is a very C orientated type of a project. That's something where you wouldn't put somebody who's a high I into that environment. So when you talk to people about their path, because we offer different paths for our employees, knowing what paths are going to play to their strengths really ensures success for them. And whether they know that's happening or not, it's the way it works out. And that's where you really can get that longevity and that happy employee to spend their entire career with you. So from a retaining perspective, yeah, it definitely allows you to put people in areas where you know they're going to succeed.
What caused you to start doing this at Collins and Jewell? How did you find out about it?
Well, the biggest thing was we had a major shift in the organization from a managerial perspective. We internally hired, brought in promoted from within a bunch of non-management type people into more management roles, and we had a lot of communication issues. And actually I was talking to another business owner about it, and he said, "Oh, well, do you do DISC?" And I said, "I don't even know what that means." So he said, "Well, we have this lady that comes in and she does the assessment and this, that, and the other thing." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd be interested." He goes, "Well, we're doing one in next month. Why don't you come and sit in on it and learn about it?" So I said, "Sure, I'll do that." So Gary, I think you went with me too. Gary and I both went and did that, and we were like, "Oh yeah, this is exactly what we need. This will at least let everybody understand how they're able to communicate better with each other." Because in our organization, it was a lot of ego and a lot of, we promoted from within, so people who had been with the organization a long time. We had recently had an ownership change, so the way they were used to dealing with the prior owners was maybe a little different than the new owners. So there was a lot of circumstantial things where we were just a mess, really, quite frankly, and we had to try to fix it. And this was the solution that we really embraced.
And how did it turn out?
So far, so good. I mean, the only thing I would say we should look at doing more is doing another round for the new employees, and that's kind of where we've gone by the wayside with it. And again, that gentleman I was talking about that we hired without looking at those deep questions, had we done that earlier in the game, we probably wouldn't have hired him, and we wouldn't have had the heartache that we did. So it's kind of reinvigorated me too, which is good, and to get us to have the new part of the organization really embrace it and take advantage of it too. So
yeah, super helpful, right? In a high growth, high change.
Yes.
And you're being awfully modest, taking over as the new owner not that long ago, and doubling the company. And so you've been doing a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah. So I mean, you want to talk a little bit more, John, about other stuff that we've been using it for and where you're seeing value?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we haven't talked about is the recruiting side.
Yeah.
So we actually do the assessment on the front end and very early in the process.
We moved it earlier. It used to be, right? The last thing we
It was
would
the
do,
last thing.
we get you all the way there. We would give you, I think you might even already had the offer or just before.
No, it was right before the offer.
Right before the offer. You did all your interviews, we
Yeah.
negotiated salary, and that was the perfunctory last thing. And at that point, it already felt too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've actually done over probably a 6-month period from there, we had moved it all the way to the front side. So now when we've reviewed someone's resume and really said, okay, we think this is a great candidate, they get a quick 15-minute video interview just to make sure. And then after that, they're assessed right then and there. And that assessment lets us know, okay, we've got someone who'd be a great fit for the team. This environment is an environment that they're driven for. This role is something that they're wired for, and they're really motivated to be in the environment that they're going to be in. Now, on the flip side, that also gives us a lot of the tools that you were talking about earlier, which help us craft the interview around with the assessment results.
Right.
So we're able to look at this 70-page report and basically say, okay, the project management is your number 25, just using this example here. Well, this person doesn't have to do a lot of project management, but they need to do some. So let's dive into how much they've been exposed to it. Maybe it's just not developed because they haven't seen it. Maybe it's just not developed because it's just not their forte. Diving into that. Looking at things that might be listed in the resume, but when you look at the developments of the behaviorals, you're like, this is low on here, but very high all over the resume. Is the resume written the way we want to read it, or is the resume really written the way that properly dictates what they've done and where they want to go? I'm trying to remember if I got back to the original point, but I think I did.
No,
which is
using
getting that earlier. And one of the things that we learned is, especially 4 years ago, we were doing between 10 and 20 interviews a week. It was extensive. Also, it was a very different job market, so there were a lot of more candidates out there.
Right.
But we were finding on the average week, we were walking away with 0 candidates that we were interested in. In a month's time, we would find maybe 1 or 2. So when you do all that math and all that meeting time and all the logistics of reading and recording, it turned out to be a massive resource, like a death hole, basically. So moving the assessment up front, yes, we've invested lots of money year over year on doing the assessments earlier, but we've kept some of the, some of our leaders and some of the more, some more of the people who are involved in the interview process out doing what they're best at, because the assessment has really dodged 99% of the bullets that they don't even have to shield anymore.
I would say the combination of video pre-interview,
Yes,
like a 15-minute pre-video interview, way better than just a phone screen.
100%.
And then if it passes that, go to the disc. Agreed. I mean, we spend tens of 20, I mean, we're on pace for like close to
We're on pace for
$30,000 worth
30,000 this year.
of disc this year, which is not insignificant. But, if it's, like $100 a shot?
It's like 200, yeah.
200. So, but if that saves a round of interviews where you're taking like VPs or whatever
Yeah.
off the line to do interviews, for us, it was a changeover that was truly worth it. And I think you hit the nail on the head, provided a lot of objective context to put with that. Pam, do you want to just talk a little bit about why DISC versus like Myers-Briggs or any other options that people may have heard of that are out there?
Yep. Yeah, certainly pre-employment assessments are legal as long as they're valid, they're reliable, and they're job specific. And especially any manufacturers in the room that do work with the federal government, you're part of the supply chain for Pratt & Whitney or Electric Boat or whatever, because there's some requirements there that assessments have to pass pretty strict requirements so that they're not discriminating against protected classes. And so I use, and it's not just DISC, but I use a certain company that does a lot of research, and they're constantly going back and validating and making sure it's reliable so that there aren't any lawsuits for discrimination against protected classes. With these particular assessments, you can do stuff with it. How many of you heard of Myers-Briggs? So Myers-Briggs it's a good tool, but it's a personality assessment. And it's great to know what your personality is. I'm, INTJ or an EF, whatever it is. But in the workplace, so what do you do with that? It's not actionable. These are behaviors that can be changed if we know how to change things, so we can actually get better results. There's another assessment that is part of the report that IT Direct uses that measures what motivates a person in life. And that, believe it or not, is set by the time you're about 18 years old. 50% of it's genetic, 50% is learned. And it doesn't really change after you're 18. So to be able to capture that as part of the pre-employment process and figure out what a person is passionate about, combine it with the behaviors so they can behave in a certain way. And oh, by the way, when no one's looking, they're going to want to. That's the motivation piece. And again, those things are valid, they're reliable, and you're not going to get sued using them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the motivators and the behaviors, super important. And we've all probably had the employee who seems to go through that cycle, right? They're good for a few weeks or a month, they slide backwards, you talk to them, they're back good for like a month, slide backwards, good for a month. And what we've learned over time is that's a right person doing the wrong job.
Yes.
Right? Because you can only fake it for so long before you're just feel like every day you're coming in, it's just like sucking all the energy out of you. And so we're able to kind of identify that before it goes into that wrong job, and then either put them in the right seat immediately or realize we don't have that right seat on the bus. So we're have 15 minutes left, and before I ask more questions, I promised that we would open it up to questions. So can I trust the floor to throw some questions out here? Who's got a question about, please.
I have 2 questions.
Please.
Rapid
So,
fire.
You mentioned the DISC assessment is legal as long as it's tailored to the job. So are there different assessments for different industries, different levels, management level? I mean, how does that work? And then my other question, you had indicated that you could post something in your your break room for folks to see. You're
Of
not
course.
posting everyone's.
No, it's that, it's basically similar to that. It's the circle, and then it talks about what a D's traits are, what an I's
People
traits are.
understand that there's different
Correct,
personalities. Okay.
Yeah, and then it actually lists off the traits of different levels, so.
So they can start thinking about.
Exactly, so when I deal with Joe, what does Joe act like? Is he more of a, that's.
We haven't got to it yet, I'll just quickly before I let you answer, but we haven't gotten to this yet, but I would like to get there. We have a client that has it in the cubicle, like everyone's like, so if I'm like a DISC, like that would be sort of like at my desk, right? So you come to talk to me and it's a good like trigger that's like, oh, because sometimes communication starts when you're not in a happy place
Right.
and you go charging over to say something, you're probably not thinking, what's the best way to communicate? You're thinking, you better be ready to pick up what I'm about to tell you. So sometimes that can be a good reminder to be like, backpedal. So I have seen that, I probably wouldn't post the full assessment, but it's not. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, you guys all got the
It's
sample,
not
right?
shameful.
What's that?
No, nothing at all.
No, and if anything, everyone that's ever read it, that we've ever talked to afterwards, has been like, oh my God, and this is the rule, right? So I always tell people, when you look at it, if you don't agree with it, put it down for like an hour, go back to the part you didn't agree and read it again. If you still don't agree with it, ask your spouse to look at it.
Well,
If your
right.
spouse doesn't agree with it, then it's probably wrong. So, right, if your spouse thinks it's right, then you're delusional, right? So,
Interestingly enough, when we did our assessments, just about everybody who did the assessment wanted the same
Yes.
assessment done on their
On their
spouse.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
That was like across the board.
That is true.
And their teenage children.
Yeah.
So you're gonna.
Oh, wait,
The first
we'll
question,
get you
yeah.
next, yep.
Sorry.
So, it wouldn't make sense to use DISC for an entire industry or, let's say, a job title in the world, because let's say project managers. So project managers need certain behavioral tendencies. But that's going to be different for project managers at IT Direct versus Travelers Insurance Company that are doing versus project management work at a construction site. So you really have to take a little bit of time getting comfortable with DISC or other assessments in your environment to determine what is required by the jobs in your company.
So we've done it where, let's say we know we've got like certain engineers that we really like we got these 3 people, they've been great. So you assess the 3 of them and you can kind of see, what we've seen anyway is, oh wow, look at these traits that are so similar between these people, that's the trait that probably works well for us. But that doesn't mean that it's the right, because it's a lot of it's cultural too, right?
Yeah.
So, we've learned that too, right? Like a lot of cultures from the leader, I tend to be pretty like efficiency and like bottom line driven and execution driven. So that works generally here as a motivator for most people,
Another thing to add to what Ari's saying, though, which you also have to be cautious of, is if you're trying to build a team of 10 people, if you throw 10 people with the same DISC profile at that job, you are not going to be happy, right? So,
We only know this because we made this mistake.
yeah. So
We're not super smart, we've just made all the mistakes.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of
Many
battle
them.
wounds, but so what we have learned is that for us in particular, the competencies and the motivators being in alignment are more important than the DISC. Because the DISC changes how everyone's brain's wired and how they really want to process the data, but the motivators make sure that everyone's in the same direction, moving for the same job.
Right. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, she's right next to me.
The question I had is, that there are 2 different styles. There's your adaptive style, right? And then there's, I don't know what the other one.
The
is.
natural.
Natural.
Yeah.
So how do you weight those 2 when you're looking at somebody who presents one way, but naturally is another? For instance, somebody might be a high, put the lampshade on when they come into the office, but need that recharge time, to be able to deal with people or what have you. So.
Yeah, sorry, were you gonna answer? You want me to
I was
go
going to say, so one of the things that DISC will pick up is how you
If anyone looked at the sample, what he's talking about is when you take the assessment, it ends up scoring you in the end, like you'll get 2 kind of DISC profiles, right? One is your natural style and one is sort of your adapted or kind of work face, right? So.
And so when you're looking at the natural versus the adapted, and let's say you're doing hiring, that's picking up how you naturally behave when you're being yourself and how you're behaving in your current place of work, which is the place you're leaving. That can change overnight, depending upon what's going on at work. Have you gotten transferred to, now you're working on another project, you've got a new boss. That's very, very changeable. Your natural stays pretty steady for most of your life.
I don't know if it's right or not, but I think we try and like put you where your natural is.
Yeah, we try to put you to your natural, and if we see a big swing in the adapted, during the recruiting process, we will focus a lot on that. So if someone was like very high I in their adapted, but more like middle range I, for some reason, when they go to, whenever they're doing, they feel like they got to turn something on. So we'll ask a lot of questions about what types of work they like to do. Do you like spending that time more alone? Do you like spending it with a group? Do you like loud volume areas? Do you like quiet spaces? To really try to figure out where their eye really stands, to drive in.
And there's certain measures, again, when you learn to use this, that when you're adapting more than X%, that's a person that's under stress. It doesn't mean there's necessarily a performance issue, but there's a stress issue. So going back and trying to find fit for the natural is an important thing.
I feel like that goes back to the thing of like the person who like wants to do this job you want them to do, but it's not who they are, right? So you can only fake it for so long, and then that's I think the under stress, right? Your next.
Do the assessments, can you tailor them to a certain role? Say for, there are certain characteristics you like to see in a salesperson.
You can benchmark jobs, and there's actually a patented process that's been around for about 20 years that you can use. In order to do that, though, you have to have a good read on what is required by the job.
Sure.
Another way to do that is if you have a number of people that are successful and they're sort of your A performers in a particular job or role, you can look at what their traits are and see what are the, and that's, I think,
Yeah,
what
I was
you,
about to say, for us, the first part didn't work so well, because when you're filling out this, benchmark, you're like, yeah, of course you need project management. Of course you need to be able to talk to people. And before you know it, you built this robot that it just doesn't exist, right?
We wanted everyone to have everything.
We wanted everyone to have
Of course we
everything.
do.
So we were literally looking for a disc profile that didn't exist. So what we went back and really looked at, okay, who's been successful? What were their character traits? And then look for those similarities and basically say, okay, at this job, we're really looking for someone who's kind of not in this specific dot, but in this like specific range. And really kind of develop it out that way.
and there are some things you can do to do comparisons pretty easily, crunch the numbers and compare the candidates against ideal profile traits.
So the adaptive style could change?
Absolutely. If something's going on in the workplace that is making you have to adapt to be successful, then yeah, you can, that can change.
Practice in terms of how often one might redo this?
And so is there, do you want to redo this at certain points? Typically, the data stays pretty accurate, except for the adapted, for about 18 to 24 months. And so if you need to refresh that every so often if there's something major that's going to happen. It takes about, so when somebody comes into a new job, so IT Direct hires a new person, when they assess people, the adapted is showing how they're behaving in their current place of work, the place that they're leaving. Sometimes takes about 6 months for that adapted to settle in, because it takes about 6 months for a person to figure out, okay, now I'm working here at IT Direct and I'm working for Jonathan, he has expectations, and it takes them a while to figure out how they need to behave to be successful.
And the same is probably true, I imagine, if someone got promoted into a job with different
Bingo.
responsibilities, management.
Or they get
I'm
moved to a
thinking
different
The flip
pro-
side of that too, though, the flip side of that is if you promote somebody into a job, how does their team maybe change?
I was going to say, or a team changes, the boss
So
changes.
who's adapted in the team and how have they adapted based on that new person being put in that role?
Yeah.
That's
As
interesting.
a practical matter, we haven't done it like all that frequently.
That's because you're cheap already.
That's probably it.
Right.
We're
You should have put a tip bucket up front.
That's right, exactly. There's a collection plate coming around. No, I think what we've really tried to do is we've invested a lot of time and energy in constant engagement right? So, and that's been, I think, a huge part of trying to see where people are, and John talked about it earlier, but coaching the leadership tier, and that leadership team's across the board having one-on-ones with everybody, right? If we talk about that leadership crew, everyone in that crew is having a one-on-one with someone below them and getting a one-on-one from someone, above them. I report to my wife. So that's happening all the time. And I think with constant engagement and really having like John driving this to make sure we're keeping an eye on it, I think we do keep a good pulse on it. And kind of, but it's interesting concept to do it on the team when they get a new leader, new position. But we've used it really effectively. And I'm just going to give one quick example and I'll open up more questions. Like what we've seen is some people in our world feel that there's a path that they need to go on, right? You start off as a L1 technician, you L2, L3, sysadmin, senior admin, engineer, then you're like designing things, and then you should be managing clients. Right? I think people see that as the progression. And like, if you really think about the people that are the happiest sitting down designing networks, do those seem like the people that are going to be really happy managing other people, like clients? That might not be a good match. And we had a great engineer who is a nice guy and has a good personality, who thought just wouldn't get off if that was his next move. And profile wasn't really quite right. We didn't think it was quite right, but he was really talented. And I think if we didn't give him the shot, he was going to go try and find that shot somewhere else. So we said, okay, let's like kind of ease into it. And then I think he got into it. I don't think I know. And he realized 3 months in, he hated it. But now I think he felt like, I've been cajoling you for a year to let me do this, and now 3 months in, I hate it. Now what? But I think utilizing this, and John talked about it, but we use this conversation to re-engage and just really make it understand like it isn't a failure to just grow your career a different direction. And it's one of the huge successes I feel like that we had to keep this person super talented. We kept their talents. We did it in a super positive way. We gave them the opportunity they had, and I think it was like our knowledge of this and understanding this that allowed us to realize ahead of time it wasn't going to work, have the forethought to do it, and then having talked to him about this and coached him with this for years, to go backwards, I think it really worked out. I mean, we've got a number of those.
We have a few of those.
There's a few of those, and that to me is worth all that we've ever invested in this, and that's just a few successes, and there's
Because you retain the people.
Yeah, and now here's the other piece. I think people see that. People see what we did. Like, there's no secrets, or few secrets. I mean, people know what goes on. The rumor mills everywhere. People see that, and it's like, this is a place that cares, right? We made the effort. We didn't go, oh, you forced us to do it. You didn't like it. Now you're stuck there. We worked it out, and those things matter. And I think it makes other people stick it out and want to be here.
What generational changes have you seen in the implementation of the DISC? Someone who's a baby boomer versus a millennial versus a Gen X. Are you seeing patterns and differences?
I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think definitely. The boomers are very hesitant about it. You're psychoanalyzing me. I don't like this. I don't like to be psychoanalyzed.
Just give me a whiskey.
Whereas I think I think it's getting more and more easy for the newer generations because they're used to that.
Yeah.
They're the student counselors, the teacher, counselors at school are much more available for younger people and things like that. So it's not as much of a negative context towards it. The interesting thing I have seen is the motivations, talking about the motivations piece, generationally have changed. So for instance, this they call it the iGen now, so that's the generation after millennials, right? And I think they also call it Gen something else. But anyways, iGen is they call it because they've grown up with iPads, iPods, all this high stuff. But they're the generation of the recession. So they were 10, 11 years old in 2008, 2009 when the recession happened. So they witnessed their families losing their houses, losing their jobs, losing their 401ks, losing all this. So they're almost like a quasi-depression generation in the sense that they're much more saving and worried about what
Stability.
things cost and not as, well, there'll be more money next week kind of attitude. So you're seeing that change, but from the DISC perspective, I think it's actually embraced much more as the generations have gone along.
I'll just add to that too. For us, it's been helpful. I mean, we've been a younger company. Like, it's funny now, like, I'm the old guy, kind of, I mean, I tell us like, well, just a little bit, yeah. I mean, I was always used to being so young, I remember we were having a conversation right out there, actually, and we were talking about, like, the cable news coming of age, and do you remember the Iraq War, right, and the green, like, the shooting everywhere, we were just talking about that, and I remember being like, yeah, Zach, do you remember that? And he was like, I wasn't born. I was like, what? Like, that's insane, and so, but what I will say is, for us, is that it's been helpful because now there's a common language, between, because we do have a lot of people in their 20s, and I think it provides a common language that is across, all those years. Would you agree?
100%. Yeah. And looking at how their motivators are slightly different than ours, right? So the company already built in its 20s is we're a different company than we are now. We had to be, right? And back then it was a bunch of guys in their 20s who were in their 20s, right? Not married, no kids, having a lot of fun. And now there's now that variety, right? And understanding how they're all motivated a little differently and trying to keep a finger on the pulse so that we keep the company exciting and engaging for all the differences.
Anybody else?
How about implementation? Larger organization than you guys, no disrespect.
Yeah.
But complexity, what would you recommend as far as rolling it out?
How big is your company?
Well, we're
Hundreds.
hundreds.
Oh, it's
yeah.
hundreds? It's going to be different in a smaller company than a larger company. What you typically want to do is have a couple of people inside, so John would be an example here, but in your company that are going to own it. And then I would start small with a pilot.
Yeah.
I would do a
some
pilot.
departments,
Departmentally would make sense
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
So if you have a success over here, then that's gonna breed other people that want the same success. So you pick pockets, and you almost wanna pick pockets where you're pretty sure there's gonna be success, so that it'll be embraced by the rest of the organization.
You might
But
wanna-
you gotta get senior management on board, that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing.
And you might also want to look at a department that is going to lose a lot of baby boomers retiring or things like that. So before they leave, let's assess what is going to be leaving the company and then look at what we need to do to replace them. So I would probably start with a smaller pilot and get some success there first.
And I've seen very large companies use this. I don't know how
Yeah.
they implemented it, but I've seen it. And I mean, just in our experience alone, we started with just 5 senior managers and try to do it amongst ourselves. And I think, I think of it like software in the sense that you can't just buy it, install it, and it's just gonna go, right? Like, it needs, and Pam hit it on the head, like, it needs a champion who's gonna help people and encourage people to use it. Like, and when it gets used, it's successful, that I've seen.
And it typically takes one, again, because it's not the assessment, it's what's the problem are you trying to solve? And it typically takes 1 to 3 years to get better at hiring, recruiting, learning from your mistakes, looking at what's working, looking at what's not working, training for people. So it's a process, it's not an event.
Not to plug Pam or anything, but what we did was, we hired Pam, and then we had, and in the beginning, we were very reliant, like every assessment would go to Pam, and John would be on the phone with her, or I'd be on the phone with her, or Steve, or whoever the hiring person was, and learning, and actually you were on almost every call so that you could learn, and now, it's very rare that we call Pam, but sometimes there's something weird we see, like, we've never seen this before, or we hired this person, we thought this was gonna work out, and we missed it, what happened? And so, I agree that it took probably 3 years before I felt, wow, we're really firing on all cylinders, but it also wasn't like binary, didn't work, it worked, it just, we made less mistakes, you know.
But you guys went across the board, you guys go all the way far to,
No, we haven't. We kept it at the management level. I'm now thinking we need to, you know? I mean, I've learned a lot from this too, so I think it definitely, but do it from a team perspective. So do it amongst the teams as opposed to across the board, all company meeting type of thing. Do it from those pods.
Granted, we're much smaller, but when we eventually went global, that's how we approached it as well.
Right.
We were, you know, a leadership of 5 when we first started, and while it was great for the 5 of us, we found that it wasn't, like, what was it providing? How is this really making a difference to the business?
Well, because the people we were leading didn't know it.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, someone has talked about like culture being like visiting a country, right? You go to a new country and you don't know the customs, and that's what culture is at a company. And it was like we had this great language, but no one else could speak it. So how was that helping us?
So when we decided to roll it out, we had picked like one of the pods, then the next pod, then the engineering team, then the cloud team, and slowly started spreading it around. And then once we had all the data was when we were really able to start influencing some amazing change.
Anybody else? I think we're after 5 o'clock. So, you know, they say it's 5 o'clock somewhere. That somewhere is here.
Just as
Oh, sorry, go
a
ahead.
final thank you for being here today, in the back, there is a sheet that you can take, and if you want to sample one of the assessments, you can take one.
You can go online basically and run your own assessment.
It'll be open starting Monday.
Right, and you just go and get it, and you can read it, and I think it's pretty cool. That's how we started with it. We did our own like sample assessment, and I was like, this is never gonna work, and I was shocked at how well it's described.
It's great. It takes like, you know, between 25 and 35 minutes to complete, and you end up with this full-blown report about yourself. Be interested.
Yeah, that's pretty
For
cool.
sure.
Thank you guys all so much for coming today. Really appreciate it.